Is everybody seeing my presentation on their screen right now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so what am I going to be talking about today? The title of this presentation is Natural Disaster Preparedness 101, and hopefully by the end of this presentation today, we will have identified the climate risks that Kansas City, Kansas is vulnerable to, which includes just maybe emergency situations that you yourself wouldn't personally categorize as climate risks, but that are identified as such, and also how to prepare for them. Generally, what we hope is that this training will be, if it's the first training that you've ever had, hopefully it will give you a good base foundation knowledge of natural disasters and how to prepare for them. But we hope that you will continue building upon your knowledge as time goes on to better prepare yourself and implement this knowledge as much as you can. Okay, here's my button. Okay, so this is just entry survey of, again, for anyone who hasn't done it, the link for this entry survey, which just tells us your preliminary knowledge, is going to be in the chat. So go ahead and take advantage of that if you haven't yet. Let me minimize this because I can't even see. Okay, so this small image here kind of just gives a rundown really quickly of the what, why, and how of today's presentation. This little infographic comes from FEMA, and essentially the what of today's presentation is all about disaster preparedness, knowing what to prepare for and why you should be preparing now. The why, of course, is again why you should be preparing now. That can maximize the community's resilience during hazardous disasters or climate events. And the how is that hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will know how to identify what climate risk Kansas City, Kansas could technically be vulnerable to, how to create a disaster preparedness plan and kit, and how to take advantage of more resources after this presentation today to continue building on your knowledge. So the what of today's presentation is listed here 1 through 12. These are Kansas City's, specifically Wyandotte County's, local climate vulnerabilities. And these vulnerabilities are listed from most likely, which is what we're going to start with number 1 right here, to the least likely, which ends in number 12 here, which is an earthquake. So I would say that I think most of us typically, when we think of climate events, weather events, or even things that could potentially cause us harm or disrupt the flow of daily life, we think about these events that are 1 through 6. And that's because these are the things that we most frequently encounter and that are most likely to happen and continue happening. Now, with things like climate change, which change the overall climate of not just Kansas City, not just Wyandotte County, but the nation and the world as a whole, these things here, 7 through 12, could become more plausible as time goes on. So that's why they're included in this list here, so that we have a full scope of understanding from the most likely to the least likely, the things that we could be dealing with in our day-to-day lives. So why is this important to know this information and to be able to predict and prepare for this information best as possible? I have kind of highlighted and underlined the crux of this quote here, which is that disaster preparedness can prevent disaster situations and also result in saving maximum lives and livelihoods to get back to normalcy within a short time period. And this quote is coming to us from the International Federation of Red Cross. So to put that into more further context, this is coming from the Wyandotte County Emergency Operations Plan, which was finalized and is most updated until 2018. It includes a section that talks about individual, family, and business emergency plans. So even in the Wyandotte County Emergency Operations Plan, they are identifying that the public, us, we are responsible for preparing for disasters just as various levels of government do, because in large events, it's unlikely that everyone's needs will be met immediately. So while I would have liked this presentation to be going through Wyandotte County's specific emergency operations plan, it is a really bureaucratic and procedural document that unfortunately doesn't provide a lot of detail that is easy to share with the public. Mostly it just talks about the way that agencies are coordinated through primary agencies and support agencies and what their roles are in emergency. So if I were personally to give a bit of feedback to Wyandotte County for their emergency operations plan, I would say that it should be more actionable and more understandable to the general public. But hopefully this presentation will provide that missing link of the procedural upper levels of government versus what we can do as the public and as citizens and as a community ourselves to better be prepared. So an amazing tool that can help us to do that is the National Risk Index, which is an online tool that's provided by FEMA that helps to illustrate the nation's communities most at risk of natural hazards. So this map is similar to pretty much all maps. The blue is good, the red is bad. If you're familiar with US geography, you can look right next to the S in states in the middle, United States, and you see there that Kansas City, both Jackson County and Wyandotte County, are the two red counties in a sea of blue, which probably leads to something that we should talk about today. So how does FEMA assess risk, and how does Wyandotte County rank? So as I said here, this red county to the left, that is going to be Wyandotte County, and this is Jackson County. Today we're going to focus on WYCO. And this here, this infographic, is essentially the equation that FEMA uses to assess which communities are most at risk. So what they do is they take expected annual loss, they multiply that by social vulnerability, and it's then divided by the community resilience to give us the risk index. I'm going to go into these variables in the next slide a little bit more. So if you look here to the left, this is how Wyandotte County breaks down. Overall, the risk index, which was below the equal sign in the previous slide, is relatively high. That's what places us as one of those red counties. Essentially, this means that Kansas City, Kansas is uniquely vulnerable to the effects of natural disasters and climate-related events. So our expected annual loss, also relatively high. And what that means is the loss of building, agricultural, and population value that could be lost to potential disasters. Social vulnerability, which essentially recognizes the inequity in Wyandotte County versus other counties in Kansas, and the vulnerable groups that could be facing immediate and long-term impacts of natural hazards and disasters, essentially meaning that it's harder to come back. That's also relatively high. But community resilience, which is supposed to be the positive element of the equation, community resilience, and like no pun intended, but it's the ability to weather the storm, the community's ability to weather the storm. So when we see that all of these three things, the risk index relatively high, loss annually is relatively high, and we have highly vulnerable populations, but our community resilience is only moderate, that means that we as a county do not have the necessary resources and economic resources specifically to bounce back from devastating events and natural hazards the same way that surrounding counties in Kansas may. So that is crucial to why these types of trainings are important, because hopefully these trainings can help to boost this relatively moderate community resilience to a community resilience that's relatively high, and our populations are better equipped to prepare for natural disasters. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to try and build that community resilience? Obviously, one training is not going to do it. I don't want to say that I've brought some golden ticket to build community resilience and help us all float on a cloud through any emergency or disaster that comes in the future. But there's a few basic things that we can talk about today that can hopefully make it just a bit easier for us to deal with these things when we encounter them. So to basically put in perspective, this infographic, make a plan, build a kit, and be informed. All of these three things fit into each one of these sections here, which is to prepare what we're doing today, what we're starting to do today, to practice the knowledge that you learn and make sure that it's actionable, and to perform this knowledge and this preparedness when the time comes. So, first step is to be informed. You all have done the first thing on this list, or you're doing it right now, which is to attend a disaster preparedness training. As I said, we hope that this will just be one block of many that build the foundation of the knowledge that you know about disasters and how to best prepare for them. Knowing what to prepare for, the list 1 through 12 of those natural disasters that we talked about. It could be flooding, ice storms, winter weather, tornadoes, landslides. All of these things go into knowing what to prepare for. Staying informed by local news and meteorologists. Hopefully this is something that we're all doing on the daily, whether this is on our laptops, on our cell phones, through our local news stations, and things like that, just to stay informed about changes that are happening either progressively or rapidly with our climate and with weather, and also seek out those additional trainings that can supplement the knowledge. Second is to make a plan. So I urge you all, whenever making a plan with your families, with your friends, within your communities, with neighbors, that you consider at least these 5 questions, because they really will make up almost 100% of what you have to include in your plan. So the first thing is, how will you receive news or updates? Obviously, I just talked about the accessibility to smartphones, to the internet, and to local TV news. But in the event that a disaster strikes and your power gets knocked out and you're not one of those lucky people that has a generator, do you have battery powered devices that can keep you updated? So those things can look like radios and other battery powered devices that have the ability to continue sharing that knowledge in the event that a disaster strikes. It also means creating bonds and better relationships with neighbors, family members, and people that even live in close proximity to you, so that in the event that there is no common knowledge or kind of national news or information being shared with you through those devices, that you at least have connections with neighbors who may know more information than you do. The second is, what is your evacuation plan and your route? I know that me and my family, we always joke about it, but there was a skating rink that I went to when I was a kid, Wynwood Skating Rink. It's by a Target, and we always joke that if a disaster was to happen, whether it's war or hail or a tornado, what have you, that's where we're going to meet at. So try to be thinking in your head and thinking with your friends, your family. What is your evacuation plan and where are you going to go? Are you going to shelter in place when X, Y, or Z thing happens? Or are you going to decide to, for lack of better words, make a run for it, you know? And what is your shelter plan? I know that throughout my life, I've lived in multiple different types of housing styles. Some had basements, some had attics, some had neither, and they were all one level. So if your shelter plan doesn't include a home that includes a basement, where is the closest shelter to you based on your current location? Do you have a neighbor who has a basement? Does your daughter or your mother have a basement that you could travel to in the event that a disaster is happening and you need to shelter in place? Fourth, and this is really, really important, have you considered you and your family's unique needs? Throughout my research that I was doing to put together this plan, I found that a lot of disaster preparedness plans were far too generic and made a lot of assumptions about people with different abilities and their ability to adapt to emergency situations. So if you're considering you and your family's unique needs, you need to ensure that your plan is inclusive of everyone who might not be able to just as easily as you get up and go. This means that you must take into account people in your family or your neighbors or community members who may have different abilities than you, who may not be able to just stand up and may need wheelchair accessible routes to get from the top of the house to the bottom of the house or out, and just all around considering your family's unique needs. Even think, for instance, if you have pets, sometimes in the heat of the moment, you can be so worried about getting your family, your children, your mother, your father out of your home that you later realize, oh my gosh, Fido, I left my dog, you know? So make sure that you are really trying to think up every scenario in your mind and really creating an actionable plan. And lastly, this is something that is not talked about enough, but have you considered changing your insurance coverage to cover your property, whether that's your home, other property, your car, in the event that a disaster strikes? And I would like to share a resource right now. Give me just 1 second. Resume share. Uh-oh, new share. Sorry, I want to share a resource about insurance preparedness because I could go on and on all day about that, but I want to give you all more information as possible, yes, the most information as possible. So I urge you, and I can share this link in the chat, to look into this resource, Insure You. So this will take you top to bottom of how to create a home inventory that you might have to refer back to in the case that you have to make a insurance claim for your property that was destroyed. It has disaster prep guides for different types of events and how they can relate to insurance. Flooding, knowing your coverage and understanding the risk, and how to essentially rework the current insurance plan that you have to best cover your property so that after you have encountered a devastating event, a terrible storm, anything of that nature, that you don't also have to worry about, oh my goodness, I did not have insurance coverage for this. I've lost everything. And that is a crucial element of the community resilience aspect of this, is that because most people are not informed about the ways that insurance coverage works in terms of their property, the house that they worked so hard to get through their whole life, or the car that they just saved up for to buy, they lose it in an instance. And that is the crucial element of that keeps at-risk communities from not being able to bounce back economically from devastating events that happen. So I'm going to go back and I will share that resource in the chat if anyone didn't get to see the link at the top. I will share that towards the end. So the next thing, the third most important thing, or the third thing in the string of this series, is to prepare a kit. So start today. Like Rachel said before, upon completing the entry and exit surveys today, Groundwork NRG will be providing anyone who would like to take advantage of a starter emergency kit. So we have included, or the kit that we prepared or that we bought includes a lot of different things, but you should also be including essentials that are specific to your needs and potential scenarios. So that goes back to the instance that I was talking about before about unique needs. When you make a preparedness kit, do not just throw in everything that's generic. Obviously, all as human beings, we need food, we need water, we need certain things to survive. But if you have someone in your family who is diabetic and they require insulin, make sure that you have a plan for either having extra supplies in your kit or knowing where you can receive those things in terms of an emergency. Similarly, if you require different medical attention that requires you to go to a facility that may have been destroyed or just, may have also experience the effects of the disaster, make sure that if, for instance, you have to get dialysis at a certain number of weeks or every other week, make sure that you know your dialysis center's emergency response plan and how you can activate their services in the event of an emergency. The next thing is to update your kit regularly. If I had been giving this presentation a year ago, probably to the date, I don't know if in my mind I would have thought to prepare, have a box of 50 disposable masks or have ibuprofen and other generic medicines on hand that can help you to fight back against a deadly virus. But because we know that now, having lived through this pandemic, that was the first thing on my mind to update in the kit, is to make sure that there are enough masks and enough PPE type materials to help you stay safe and stay healthy in the event that a disaster of that sort strikes. And also be practical. In my mind, you know, I could think up 1,000,001 scenarios, and we could go through preparing a tornado, preparing for a flood, preparing for a hurricane, all of those things. But at the end of preparing for each of those individual disasters, you might find that you have 100 pounds worth of things that you're expecting yourself or you and your partner to carry in the event of a disaster, and that's just not practical. So make sure that you're being realistic about what you need and only including things that are absolute necessities to survive. The fourth element is to practice. Do not allow your disaster preparedness plan and kit to become outdated, because if it does, it serves no purpose, and it may actually cause more anxiety in the moment for you to be thinking back to 2 years ago when you created a plan and, oh, what did we put in that plan? Well, I don't remember. We said we were going to do this, but that's when we lived in our old house, you know? So make sure that through moves and through changes in your life that you are updating your plan and making sure that you are not allowing it to become outdated and hence useless to you. That includes going over your disaster preparedness plan with your friends and family at least twice a year. So if you have an idea of your preparedness plan in your mind and you think, okay, if disaster happens, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell my kids, do this, do this, do this. But then your kids in the moment are frazzled. They have no idea what you're talking about. They have never heard this information before. It is only going to help you if you create a plan that is actionable and that you can practice. And it doesn't have to be terribly scary. Like I said, perform drills to improve the execution of your shelter and evacuation plans. And that doesn't mean, you know, preparing for hellfire, but it could be something fun that you and your family do to make sure that you're keeping it updated, you are keeping it useful, and that everyone is aware of what you all plan to do in the case of an emergency. Fifth is to perform. And obviously the previous slide was about performing it beforehand, but this iteration of perform means to be a performer in the event that you, God forbid, have to come up against these disastrous scenarios and situations. Attempt to center the information that you have learned when encountered with a disaster. I know that it's much easier said than done to tell you to give yourself a woosah when things are happening, when stuff is hitting the fan, but attempt to center the information that you have, because this information is critical. And as mentioned before, why this is important, because it can save maximum lives and livelihoods if we are performing this knowledge that we have in the moment that we need it. Also, be an advocate for disaster preparedness. Part of the reason why this information is crucial and why we're sharing it today is part of that advocacy that is needed to enhance community resilience for Wyandotte County. So while we are in a way doing just one small part of that with this disaster training, I hope that each of you would take this information and share it with the next person and share it with as many people in our community as you can to increase the knowledge base and to thus increase the resilience. Involve your neighbors, your friends, and your community in your disaster prep to enhance community knowledge and resilience. So I think a really important part of that too is don't only keep this to yourself, don't only keep it in a small circle, but if you know that you live next to someone who might be an elderly person who lives alone, make sure that you are communicating with them and being a good neighbor and asking, hey, do you have a disaster preparedness plan? Have your grandkids, has your kids, have other neighbors come to you and talked about a disaster preparedness plan? And if possible, really be a resource for people and include others in your disaster preparedness plan if you know that they may not have as much of a support system as you, because that is incredibly important. So this is the part where we will share what is included in the disaster kit that we have today so that we can better educate just everyone on what you can receive today and how to build on it. So in our Ready America Starter Emergency Kits, it includes, this is for 2 people and 3 days worth of emergency items. So that is food, water, first aid kit, 2 safety light sticks, 2 emergency blankets, ponchos, a whistle, masks, tissue, gloves, and a backpack that is nice and small. It's probably only about this big. It's very compact, so it's very easy to lug around. So the next thing that we will say, I'm sure everybody's looking at this like, oh, those gloves suck. Oh, that glow stick, I won't be able to see anything with that. You know, if you're thinking, okay, well, I need a dozen more things in my emergency preparedness kit, and I'm thinking of all these things that I would also include, this next list is some supplemental items for kits that I could think of off the top of my head and through doing research of other kits that you could include. That includes a normal flashlight, batteries, portable chargers, battery-powered radios, secured documents. Now this, I really want to highlight this, secured documents. I know that all of us probably have 1 or 2 things in our mind that we say, oh, if a fire ever happened, this is the one thing that I would grab, or these are the 2 things that I would grab. I know for my family, it may seem really trivial, but it's photographs. It's photographs that are all in one place. But I would urge you, before you pick up those photographs or before you pick up whatever it is, that one item that you said you wanted to take with you, make sure that you have secure documents in one place that is readily accessible, because those secure documents are going to be your financial security blanket once everything has passed, once the storm has passed. If you don't have identification, a social security number, the deed to your home, the note on your car, whatever it is, it's going to be harder for you to come back and be able to make those claims and get back to normalcy without those things. So other things, masks, trash bags, moist towelettes to clean hands, can openers, hand tools. And like I said before, really want to emphasize this, your family's specific needs. So whether that's dog food or insulin or what have you, make sure that you have it. And these are just some additional resources that I've included. This is pretty much where I got the breadth of information that I shared today, and they have only more. So if you want information that is more specific to one specific type of disaster, unfortunately, it would have been a little impractical to go through, here's how to prepare for a flood, here's how to prepare for tornado, especially with 12 different potential disasters at varying risks. But if you want to supplement your knowledge in that way by including more information about that, these are 3 very credible sources that you can go to begin adding on to the knowledge that you've gained today, hopefully, and that the knowledge that you came in with before this presentation today. And I will share these links in the chat as well. So now, if everyone, and I'm gonna